Baldur's Gate 3 and the level of investment from the devs for the game is way too high for the industry standard. Nah, that sounds like bullshit to me. Where is this?
So this video is going to be a little bit rough because, well, I wasn't really prepared to make another video this week. However, before I go on vacation, I ended up stumbling upon an article, and I absolutely had to talk to you guys about it.
Okay.
The article is basically about how a bunch of developers feel that they shouldn't be held to the same standards as Baldur's Gate 3 is setting.
What?
A lot of people are seeing Baldur's Gate 3 for the first time. They're watching the videos, or some of them actually got to have some hands-on gameplay, and they're sitting there going, man, this is a huge step forward for RPGs and etc., but there's some people that don't want to be held to the same standard that Baldur's Gate 3 is setting right now. And for the smaller developers that hop in on this conversation, I think they are absolutely valid with what they're bringing up. However, things get really interesting when AAA developers also feel like they need to chime in as well. This article comes from Game World Observer. The article is titled,
I mean, this kind of stuff happened with Elden Ring. Remember that?
Why Devs Consider Baldur's Gate 3 Anomaly. Not new standard for the RPG genre. It's Rockstar level nonsense for scope. The article reads, what sparked the debate for Baldur's Gate 3?
Okay.
This all started with a Twitter thread by Strange Scaffold head Xalavier Nelson Jr. I'm glad I said that right this time. The studio head is best known for Space Warlord Organ Trading Simulator and the upcoming Max Payne shooter El Paso Elsewhere. He cited several things that separate Baldur's Gate 3 from most RPGs in the market, namely long development cycle that started back in 2017.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I thought the game already came out. Yeah, I thought I played it whenever it came out, but it turns out that was actually just a beta.
Previous games, Divinity Original Sin 2 and Divinity Original Sin,
yeah, I was just
worth
an
of
idiot.
tech and institutional knowledge to draw from. Successful early access period lasting 3 years that provided Larian with community feedback, bug hunting, and cash flow. A huge team of over 400 developers across 7 studios. The license for one of the largest entertainment IPs out there in Dungeons & Dragons.
Okay.
Reading directly from Nelson's tweet, like a lot of people, I'm deeply excited for the lovely folks at Larian and what they've accomplished with Baldur's Gate 3, but I want to gently, preemptively push back against players taking that excitement and using it to apply criticism or raise standard to RPGs going forward.
Okay, it's 1 out of 10. Let's hear what he has to say.
This is not a new baseline for RPGs. This is an anomaly. Adding that, trying to reach the same bar without the same experiences or advantages could kill an entire group of studios. Adding on to that, Rebecca Harwick from Grimoire.
Let me read what he says. Let's read what he says. Let's find out for ourselves. Okay. So he's made 3 videos responding to people that were not happy about what he said. Okay, so this doesn't look good. Like a lot of people, I'm deeply excited about the folks of Larian. You can't separate a game from the process used to build it. So let's look at Larian is taking into development for the final version of the game. Okay, dev starting there. Okay, good. License and brand. This is a small incomplete list. Larian is coming into this game swinging with a gigantic weight of expectation to deal with. We're also doing it with an immense amount of wind, direct experience, resources, tooling at their backs. I think also keep in mind that, yes, they also researched the wind ahead of time. You know, having a tailwind, you might think that this is just some sort of like an accident. Oh, they cultivated this positive outcome, right? It's not like, oh, you just got lucky that the wind was at your back. No, this was a cultivated outcome. So let's see here as a TLDR. In the era of mega games, Baldur's Gate 3 is one of the largest attempted, built by a specialized group of people using mature tech specifically built to make this specific game, reinforced by invaluable mass player feedback and market validation ahead of its launch. This is not a new baseline for RPGs. This is an anomaly. Trying to do the same thing in the same way without the same advantages could kill an entire group of studios. If they go as big or bigger with the next title, Larian themselves could die. That's the risk reward with a mega game, of course. We're an industry dangling elephants over cliffs, pointing at ones that don't collapse under their own weight as indictments of the ones that do. Please celebrate the achievements created by Baldur's Gate 3. It looks like a massive amount of effort. It's going to pay off in a big way. One of the brightest voices in the medium. But if you shout that every RPG should be like this going forward, you have no excuse. You just missed the point. You've created expectations and conditions to ensure that your favorite creators may not be able to give you a thing that you want ever again. Well, I think that it's not really up to the... Like, I can see what he's saying, and I think that there's, like, some truth in what he's saying, but I also don't think that the customer can be wrong in matters of taste. If people like Baldur's Gate 3, and this is the expectation that they have, then the studios that make these games either rise to that expectation or they lose in the competitive market, because that's just what happens. Like, if one studio is able to make games that is, like, way better than everybody else, and, like, again, he's saying that Baldur's Gate 3 is an anomaly because of the, like, development time and everything like this. But, like, many games have been developed for, like, years and years and years. Think about, like, Elder Scrolls, you know, for example. And there have been games that were developed for 5-10 years. Duke Nukem Forever comes out, it's garbage. So I don't think that's necessarily a guarantee that it's going to be good. But the truth is that if you want to compete in a free market, you have to compete with people that are willing to invest that much into a game. And at the end of the day, a customer has $50, and they can either buy the mega game or the game that's not the mega game, right? I mean, in this, based off of his language. So why would a customer ever make a decision to buy a game that even the developers of the game potentially are saying isn't as good? It's the same as streaming. Like, you can't expect people to watch your stream just because you don't have the time or resources to buy a better computer or buy a better mic or buy a better PC or buy a better camera. You can't expect people to make up for your lack in quality just because you think that they owe it to you or something like that, or you think that's what's fair. The truth is that the customer is the ultimate decider in what succeeds and doesn't succeed in the market, whether that is a video game, whether that's a content creator, or whether that's like a TV show. The customer is the ultimate decider. And if people want games that are like Baldur's Gate 3 and are willing to not buy games that aren't like Baldur's Gate 3, then you either make a game like that or pack your fucking bags. Because that's just how it is. I'll watch his video real quick and we'll see what he has to say.
How a week ago on Twitter about how Baldur's Gate 3, as cool as it looks, as much as we should celebrate what Larian has achieved, is not a baseline or standard for what games can be moving forward. It's an anomaly, much like the other.
And again, like, every customer decides what that baseline is. The studio doesn't decide what that baseline is. The studio makes the game that they can make, and then the customer decides if it meets their baseline.
Other mega games being made in this era of development.
Yeah.
And that caused a whole kerfuffle. So I'm going to address some of the comments and concerns with that discussion via video.
Sure.
The first major category of concern that I see around this is people saying, are you saying we should expect our games to not be good, meaningful, well-made, stable games at launch? And I'm not saying that at all.
I do think that, like, this idea, like, I have, like, there's like a little bit of, like, double talk going on here. Because, like, I expect always online live service games whenever they're released to be garbage. I just expect them to be garbage. I expect them to be fucked up, messed up, etc. Do I think that's acceptable? I'll deal with it, right? But it's really fucking annoying. It is extremely fucking annoying. And the only reason that we put up with it is because nobody else can do it right. But if people started doing it right, and then the studios that couldn't do it right still weren't doing it right, they wouldn't be studios anymore. That's the truth. They're all fucking up, so it's okay.
What I am saying is that the terrifying thing about investing into video games is that money, time, and specialized development staff do not guarantee quality. They don't. It can give a talented dev team space to fail and then succeed. It can give you space to put more game inside of your game, but it does not guarantee quality or that the game will come out at all. Whether the game...
I mean, sure, of course that's true. Yeah, that's the same with anything. Like,
comes out, whether the game will be good, whether the game reaches enough people, all three of those things, regardless of your time or budget level, are up in the air. And that means...
I think that they are up in the air, but, like, I don't think it's as much up in the air as he's making it out to be. I think that a lot of times games get pushed out and they're not finished. And if you ask the developers, like, you got this developer drunk, and it's 2 in the morning, and you ask them, was it ready for release? They would say no. And I think that's what happens a lot of times, is that the game gets pushed out on purpose and it's not ready.
That the one thing that money, time, and development staff do guarantee is risk. Games are business and art. They're creativity and science. If we could do it perfectly 100% of the time, we would. But there's no blueprint or template. So, when $20 million gets lost on a game, that's obviously a big amount of money.
Yeah.
But when $200 million gets lost in a game, it can take an entire wave of studios with it. 7 studios.
You saw that happen with Forspoken, for example. They invested a ton of money into the game, and then it went straight into the garbage. And that's what happens.
Not including outsourcing partners, worked on Baldur's Gate 3 alone. If that goes down, it...
He got another one.
So, when $20 million gets lost on a game, it can take an entire wave of... It can even, because of its gravitational pull, label an entire genre as an irradiated wasteland that doesn't get touched for years to come.
He's actually really right about this, and I think this is a very good insight, is that failure in a genre that's that large of a scale can actually lead as an indicator for nobody else to make a game in that genre. I think that obviously MMO and RTS, right? I mean, that's, you know it, I know it, everybody knows it.
This is the second more insidious effect of the mega game. If developers and players determine that games with a half-decade or more of development time and hundreds of millions of dollars in their budget are the only games worth making. RPGs aren't selling right now? You don't invest $100 million into it. If a classic series, perhaps beloved by many, if its budget for a resurrection can't reach $100 million, $200 million, it's assumed that it can't have a real impact within the market or enough to make it worth pursuing. I
wish that the people that make these games would understand that sometimes adding more things to the scope of a game doesn't necessarily make the game better. I think that a lot of these developers, it's kind of like I see this a lot with companies where it's like how does Twitter fire 80% of their people in the game and the website still works? What were the 80% of people doing? Like, what the how's that even possible? And like, that's the kind of stuff that I wonder. Like, how do you have all these people that are working at a company and then they're doing nothing? They're creating no product. They're useless. I think that oftentimes, like, if you're spending all of this money on a game, I think that, like, this guy is just assuming this cost. Maybe the cost is part of the problem. Maybe you're focusing on the wrong things. Maybe you're investing money in places that you shouldn't invest money into, and you're not investing in places that you should. Like, have we ever thought that maybe the reason why you're failing with your $100 million investments is that they should be $20 million investments? And you do 5 of them, and then 2 of them succeed? It's just, I mean, come on.
Resource into the mega game that you're making. Games are already being defined right now behind the scenes by whether or not they can have the maximum amount of time and investment pumped into them. And anything that can't reach that is denied. It's an entire future of your favorite video games that's being determined as not worth making because it isn't expensive enough to be affordable.
I feel like this is a massive indictment of the industry if this is actually true. This is, like, super bad. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, oh, the game is expensive. The game isn't expensive, so we don't want to make it. Like, I genuinely believe this. I've said it like 10 times. I think that AAA studios are getting too big to succeed. I think they move too slow. Consumer interests evolve too fast. And you're going to have, listen, whenever GTA 6 comes out, everybody's going to play it, right? Whenever the new Souls game comes out, everybody's going to play it, sure. But there's a lot of these other games that, like, the little nuances to them, and these are also, like, beyond S-tier examples. Like, I'm talking about, like, the B and A tier examples. Like, remember that one game? What the fuck was it? I don't even remember its name. I hope nobody else does, too. That one game that we watched, and it looked like absolute pixel soup, and they were on, like, some ship, and it looked like this, like, super over-designed Anthem-like game. It looked like fucking garbage. And you know they invested probably $100 million into that shit. And so, nobody remembers it. I probably would remember the name if I saw it. But yeah, nobody even remembers the name of the game. Exoprimal? Maybe Exoprimal. I don't know. That could have been it. So yeah, these games are just so bad. And maybe you're investing... I think these developers are investing money in the wrong places. That's the truth. I really think they're just investing way too much money in the wrong places.
Oh, buddy, I hope you don't want to become a triple...
He says, I'm super worried about gaming nowadays becoming like movies where everyone's putting all their eggs in 2 baskets. Oh, really? It's becoming... How many fucking Spider-Man movies have we had? A lot. How many Spider-Man games have we had? Also a lot. It's more like movies are becoming like games.
...play game director, because in 2013, 10 years ago, Activision Blizzard put out roughly 30 video games. And if you even just look at their big titles that year, there was 10 or 15 big swings. Big AAA games from Activision. Now, 2023, Activision has put out Diablo 4,
yep,
which has been in development for 6 or 7 years. And by all reports, they're going to put out a Call of Duty. So, if you want it to be...
I don't know. I mean, is Activision going to make a new Call of Duty? I mean, fuck, who knows?
A director on a big AAA game, your chances went from 15 to 2. Shit's weird right now.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely weird. And also, I think it's because they don't have the creativity to make a game that actually defines the genre. And I think that's one of the reasons why we haven't seen a lot from the Riot game. Because I don't think that the Riot developers... I think Riot knows that a massive amount of their reputation is tied... it's tied to the MMO. And they have to find a way to define the genre. And I don't think that they've been able to do that yet. Or that they know how to do that yet. Because right now, almost all MMOs are just trying to be a better version of WoW. That's it. Like, WoW is seen as the foundation or the template, and then they build off of that. And I think that's not good.
Make bank. Especially in... So I have 3 pieces of good news for you and your son. The first one is that programmers make bank. Especially in industries that aren't video games. Games programmers and games...
Yeah, basically. I'm pretty sure a programmer... I'm pretty sure programmer in like finance or banking, kind of the same thing really, but you know, it's gonna make more money than gaming. But yeah, sure.
People in general are often paid less than their counterparts in other industries. So whether it's finance or agritech or whatever the case may be, programming is everywhere. You should be fine. Don't worry. The second major thing that I would say is a source of hope is he can be a creative director if he aspires to be on projects of a different scale. At the AAA size of things, we are getting eggs put into 1 or 2 baskets.
I think this is just so dangerous that AAA games are trying to... Like, why not just try to develop the next BattleBit? I really like what Riot does, for example, where Riot still takes shots like this with their Riot Forge games. Where it's like, they license their IP to other studios to make games on their behalf. I think that's actually a really smart way of continuing more content for the game.
But at the AA side and on the indie side, he has a chance of still being able to make his creative dreams and vision come to life with a team. He could even lead his own team in his free time because of the new accessibility of games tools that are available with things like Unity and Unreal Engine. He could make his own team, have a Larian of his own one day. That's oddly within reach right now, and that wasn't the case for a lot of prior ages of video games.
That's what I was saying before about how this is the best age in gaming nowadays, is that like the barriers to entry for making a video game now are just so much more, like, so much less than they used to be.
Last major source of hope that I would offer is that all of the scary, unsustainable things I'm talking about can change.
Oh, they will have
We're
to.
at the tipping point, in fact, for being able to basically determine what the next 10 or 20 years of video games look like.
Yeah.
So, if we change the way we talk about, buy and play video games, creating the systems that cultivate the video games and the healthy work environments that we want to see, that enable creators to give us the best version of games and not just the ones that some guy somewhere with a spreadsheet decided would be the most profitable. We get that if we change the way we talk about, buy, and play video games. So
of course,
we've got hope. We just gotta work together. 2023, and here's why. Video games kind of can't afford to be specific in 2023, and here's why. So over roughly the past 20 years, the games industry...
I don't agree with this. I'll listen to what he says, but I don't agree with this. Just right off the rip.
...has seen a major change in the processes used to make games. Not just the graphical quality, not just the types of things we can achieve, but specifically how we achieve them. Every year of game development costs you money, and that only increases the more people you have working on a game at the same time. So, in the early 2000s, and even as late as 10 years ago, our biggest games were still taking between 2 to 3 years to develop. And now, we're firmly in the era of the mega game. Games with hundreds of millions of dollars in their budget, not including the marketing.
So I think that, okay, so if he's talking from like the perspective of like massive big studios, then yeah, it's probably better for a game to have like multiple angles. That's why, for example, Diablo 4 has like MMO elements to it as well. It has, you know, some degree of social elements. It's because they want to have more different groups of people that can come into the game. But I do think that a video game being specific is actually a very good thing. And, you know, a great example of this, Vampire Survivors, Halls of Torment, Fortnite, BattleBit, let's see, Street Fighter, like there are many super popular, hyper-specific games, but of course they're probably not going to hit like the same peaks that, you know, some game that tries to appeal to everybody will.
And those numbers have changed dramatically. Grand Theft Auto 3, the game that in many ways kicked off the modern age of the 3D open world game, was made with a team of roughly 25 people in 2 years. Red Dead Redemption 2 took 8, with thousands of people working on it. Horizon Forbidden West, 5 years. Starfield, 7 years. And every time that number goes up for the industry at large, the number of people that one game needs to potentially be able to bring in at one time in order to justify the expense.
He's actually making a really good point here. He's saying that because the games are so expensive, they have to appeal to a wide enough audience. And I think that what happens is that whenever you try to cast a net that big, it doesn't really catch anything because it doesn't really appeal and it doesn't really hook anybody.
Goes up as well. I grew up playing and loving stealth games like Splinter Cell and Tenchu.
I always hated
and these
them.
games were made in the millions to tens of millions of dollar budget range. And because they were making a stealth game specifically, because they were doing that for 2 to 3 years, because they could, for lack of a better term, afford specificity. Every decision in that game, from the art style to the way you could interact with the world to even the way story was delivered, was all calibrated to deliver the best stealth experience possible, and you could feel it. Now you could say that stealth...
Okay, all right, there's one more.
Now you could say that stealth is more places than ever. It's in Cyberpunk. It's in Spider-Man. But those are...
Yeah, every game has stealth now, and that's what he's saying, right? It's like every game is trying to incorporate everything.
Stealth playthroughs, stealth play styles. And as talented and hardworking as those designers are, that's never going to be the same as an entire experience intended to deliver one specific cool thing.
That's
I'm a
true.
game developer, and I've been talking a lot.
And I think that's the issue. And again, that's the too big to succeed thing, is that whenever you need to cast that wide of a net, sometimes it ends up like appealing to nobody.
Recently about how the size of your game determines what you can and can't make. And as a result, a lot of people have been coming into my mentions and saying, this guy sounds scared. This guy sounds like he isn't ready to reach the raised bar that we're getting because of the mega games that exist right now. And I'm not scared. I'm very good at...
I don't think that other games have to be... I feel like games can coexist. Like, you can have a $5 game that's really good at being a stealth game, and you can also have a mega game that's $200 million. Like, it's not like there has to be one game that everybody plays. Elden Ring cast a big net, and they caught a huge amount of players, so no, I disagree. I think that there are examples of games that do that, things like Grand Theft Auto, etc. But I also think there's a lot of examples of games that don't. So I see what you're saying, but in general, whenever you try to appeal to so many people, I feel like there are a lot of games that I see. I think Anthem was a really great example of this. Is that like these are games that were designed by a committee of people that have a focus group that tells them what video game players like. You know, like if they, you know, like the last game that they seriously played was Donkey Kong.
My job, and there are few things in this world that I love as much as not just fulfilling player expectations, but exceeding them, making experiences especially that seem ridiculous or like they shouldn't work into games that are meaningful and that reach players in ways that otherwise would never be possible. There is one thing that scares me though, and it's that players aren't being told what they're losing. Every mega game intended to reach the entire world at a single time. There are 100 video games you're not being allowed to play that would have specifically been just for you.
Yeah. I think that's definitely true. And also, like, if you go back and you play, like, you've got games like Secret of Mana, for example, that are like, I mean, actually, like, by the way, like, after listening to everything this guy said, he's really not out of pocket at all with what he was saying. Like, it's reasonable. It absolutely is. Like, it wasn't bullshit in any way. Like, what do you guys think? Yeah, I don't... Yeah, I think that was fine. Larian Games were multiple times on the verge of being bankrupt, but they still moved on. Yep, that's definitely definitely part of it. Yeah, he's wrong. Well, I think that, like... I don't think that he's wrong. You could say that, like, his analysis is unfortunate. You don't like that he's right, but I don't think he's wrong.
Games added, this whole thread, you can't be appalled by how much big games cost to make, and those lavish productions, the standard by which all these games are judged. I hope Baldur's Gate 3 is a generous, once-in-a-lifetime RPG. I hope no one expects 10 to 20 to 40-person teams to make one. Now, most of the other
people expect to have a game that has the scope of Elden Ring in it. I think that the real frustration comes out whenever a game is just bad. If a game is short, people want more of the game. If a game is bad, people don't want the game.
Developers that hopped in on this tweet also shared similar sentiments. However, they were also smaller third-party companies or indie developers, and we don't have those same kind of expectations for them that we would anybody else. We wouldn't look at them and say, well, you need to make games that look and play just like Baldur's Gate 3. That just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. We don't look at a game like Vampire Survivors and expect those guys to turn around and come out with the next Halo or something like that.
Yeah, definitely.
If anything, we actually expect from those smaller companies to produce
more
less
small games,
polished games to us that just have more in-depth gameplay or explore a very specific part of gameplay in a much larger scope than most games normally do, and have really simplified game loops that keep us.
By the way, somebody said, isn't it disingenuous for her to say the consumer knows how many people are in a dev team? Yes, the consumer does not give a fuck how many people are in the dev team. It doesn't matter. Oh, it took $200 million to create? Well, I don't give a fuck. I don't want to spend $70 for it. Well, I don't care. Well, I want to play the game. Well, it takes time. I don't care. It's not the consumer's job to care.
Keep us addicted, like a Vampire Survivors or something like that. Now, what's really interesting about this thread is that, well, it doesn't just end with the third party and the indie developers. No. The AAA developers felt like they should also chime in as well. And, oh boy.
Here we go.
Oh boy.
Here it comes.
Insomniac Games design manager Ryan McCabe urged others not to use a singular game to set expectations for everyone that's developing RPGs because it isn't useful, and instead
I want every game to be like Elden Ring. That's right. I said it. Want every game, that is the tip of the mountain. Now, if you don't get to the tip, I understand it. But you better be on the fucking mountain. Don't be on some hill over somewhere else talking about battle passes and gotcha bullshit.
Ed Foolhardy. Obsidian Entertainment design director Josh Sawyer noted that having the foundation set and the funding to build things on your own terms is invaluable. This is not downplaying the talent.
It's, again, please understand that we have quarterly profits to make. No, the consumer is not responsible for you being able to make money, so they have to buy your shitty game. No, that's not how it works. What the fuck are we talking about here? This is insane.
Work on Baldur's Gate 3, but acknowledging the case is atypical for the games industry. Now, I find these tweets specifically a little bit more interesting. I don't know if this is industry transparency. Are they telling us that, you know, some of these larger studios like Insomniac or Obsidian Games don't actually have any autonomy over the things that they're creating? Or
I bet they don't. I bet they probably don't. And I think that is probably one of the biggest reasons why we see lower levels of, I think a lot of video games now are not as creative as they used to be in a lot of ways. I think the storylines are very much copy-paste. Whenever I see many of these games, I can kind of predict what's going to happen, especially with like these bigger games. You look at the menu, you look at the battle pass, you look at the way the game is set up. I think it's kind of the same fucking thing. Like, how many of you guys have never played a game, but you see the game UI and you watch the game for like 30 seconds and you know everything that there is to know about it? Like, especially this is true with shooters. It is so fucking true with shooters. And this is what happens. And I think that it's a huge problem. And the reason why it's a huge fucking problem is because the developers that are making these games, they're actually, you know, coding move leg, left leg, right leg, left leg, right leg. These guys went to school to make Elden Ring. They didn't go to school to make fucking cookie cutter, like, let me think, cookie cutter looter shooter game with a battle pass that's on a bi-monthly basis. These are people that were inspired by Pikmin. They were inspired by Super Mario, inspired by Dark Souls, inspired by World of Warcraft, something like that. And that creativity is just being fucking like put in a garbage disposal. That's just getting destroyed. And what comes out of it is this shit. That's what I think happens. Now, I think it's very problematic. And I think it's more corrosive than people might imagine. Because whenever you are disconnected from being, like, because they're in a creative role. And one of the worst things that you can do to a person in a creative role is prevent them from being creative.
Are they telling us that they don't get the amount of funding that they need for some of the projects that they're making? Or are they saying that they do? It's interesting to say that they're jumping in on this conversation and saying that they also don't want to be held to the standard that Baldur's Gate 3 is putting out when they themselves come from companies that have more than enough resources to be able to put out the exact same quality of games as Larian Studios does. Just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Now, things get really interesting when Diablo 4 senior designer Chris Balzer also drops in.
Okay.
He says, "You're absolutely right. Even if you look at one of Vink's touchstones, Ultima 7, that's a game that had 12 years of prior games feeding into it. If we were to look at this as a new benchmark, we would need to then focus on creating conditions just like with Tears of the Kingdom." Furthermore, he states, "But people often only look at the fruits of labor and not the labor itself."
It's because nobody cares about the labor. Nobody gives a shit. That's why everybody goes and buys Adidas shoes even though they were made in sweatshops. That's why that's why AI art is so popular. Nobody actually cares about how hard you worked on something. Please stop caring about how hard you work. That is not a badge of honor. That is just, and oftentimes, it should be the opposite. You work too fucking hard to achieve too little. Work smarter, not harder. What the fuck are you talking about? Like, we need to care about how much effort you put into it. Of course it matters to an extent, and people can appreciate the effort that is involved. But don't expect people to one-to-one value to effort. Because you can put a lot of effort into something, and it can be worth fucking nothing. That's just how it is. Like, and again, like, there are many games that, like, with a benchmark for a game, Diablo 4 is a great example. Diablo 4 has 20 years of prior games feeding into it. And on release, it's not as comprehensive as Path of Exile. And I don't think it's supposed to be in some ways, but I know that it's trying to be in some ways, and it's not yet. So that's just how it is. And it doesn't matter about how many people are on the team. I don't care. You release a game, people are going to be like, hey, this either works or it doesn't.
Same as it ever was, I guess. Same deal with people wondering why there are so few artists painting like Renaissance masters. And now this is where I'm saying to pump the brakes. It's completely fine for some of these smaller companies to hop in, some of these smaller developers to hop in and say, hey, don't hold us to these kind of standards, even though I think
nobody's going to say that.
It's weird that they even bring it up, because I can't imagine people actually doing that.
Yeah, nobody does that.
But it's a completely different thing when you have Diablo 4 coming into the picture. We're talking about a company that has far more resources than Larian Studio does, far more people working for them, far more just money, experience, everything, far more everything. If we're going to be running by at least his idea of how things should work, well, then that should be the same case for Diablo 4. And Diablo 4 should show this massive evolution of the series from years of experience and all of the other...
Yeah, I think Diablo 4 is a great game, but it's not... It doesn't evolve the genre. It's not Elden Ring. It's a great game. But it's not there.
Games that's been feeding into it,
well,
whether that's
Warcraft,
StarCraft, Overwatch, whatever. It doesn't matter.
I know people might not like that I say
personally,
that, but I do like it.
Even though I like Diablo 4, it is definitely not that game. It's not that game that has 20 years of other games that are feeding into it.
Well,
it's not the game that reflects all of this experience learned from prior Diablo titles. Now, like I said before, it is completely fine for some of these other companies to hop in and have their opinion and say, you know, don't hold us to this standard. It's a completely other thing for these AAA companies to come in and try to use this as an excuse. No, because Larian did set the bar. They set the bar for you. AAA games should absolutely be aiming to hit the same mark that Larian Studios does. There's absolutely no excuse for it, especially with the size of some of these companies and how much money they have available to them, how many people they have that are working for them, how long-standing some of their franchises are. There are no excuses whatsoever for them not to be able to compete with games like Baldur's Gate 3 in terms of scope, in terms of depth, in terms of performance.
I don't give a fuck if you compete in terms of scope or depth or performance in some regards. Is the game fun to play? Like, why is everybody talking about these factors that don't matter? I don't give a fuck about the depth of the game if it's fun. Look at the depth of Only Up. There's like nothing going on in that game, but it's still fun to play. A Jump King. Mario, yes. What are we talking about? Like, again, like I get that this stuff matters to an extent, but like people put so much fucking value in my opinion, things that are not defining characteristics of an incredible game.
I mean, you look at Larian right now, and they've already come out and said, you know, we don't care about meeting a specific date. We want to make sure that when we release this game, it's going to play at 60
Blizzard used to say that too.
Stable on the PlayStation 5.
Those were the good days.
They're taking their time to make sure that the game comes out for the Xbox and it's in perfect working condition when it does, regardless of whatever hiccups or problems that they've had along the way. This is a company that holds itself to a standard, a quality standard that many developers don't anymore.
And I think that's the factor. And I think also, like, again, going back to what I was saying from being, like, disconnected from the creative pursuits of your labor and like, that whole conversation, I think that, like, having to push out games that aren't ready, I think the developers know they're not ready. I don't think the guys that, like, actually code the game, I don't think they're stupid. Sometimes I do. But most of the time, I really don't think so. I think that there is just, because this is what my dad told me, right? My dad used to be an executive at a publishing company. And he used to tell people, and he used to have to be the one to tell people, listen, we can only reprint so many pages. This is the money that we have had allocated, and there are going to be errors and mistakes, and that's just how it is. Sure. And you know what I bet that does? I bet that dramatically demoralizes people. It massively demoralizes them. Because they came in there looking to make a perfect game. And they're getting forced into pushing out something that is not. Are you more willing to play a Baldur's Gate 3 now? Maybe, I don't know.
This isn't a excuse for other developers not to be able to meet that. No.
Yeah.
Instead, this is an example that they should be trying to follow in the footsteps of.
Yeah.
I'm interested to hear your guys' thoughts on this. I, again, wasn't really planning on putting out another video. I'm going on vacation after this. I'll be back. It'll be a couple more weeks before I get any other videos out. But, yeah. I just wanted to give some light to this. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys did, subscribe to the channel. If not, that's cool, too. Outside of that, stay cool, stay righteous, stay safe, my friends, and peace.
I think a great example of this in streaming is Germa. Germa does these events, and like Ludwig, who does these events, and like there's a few other guys that do these crazy events that are like so big and like so expensive and so in-depth, etc., that like it does raise the bar for streaming for everybody. But like nobody expects, I don't know, S-Fan on Tuesday to come up with content that's of the same quality as Germa's Dollhouse. Nobody expects this, but whenever Germa's Dollhouse is on or something like that is on, well, people are going to want to see that. People are going to want to watch that, and that should be the goal. And it doesn't mean that it's that's not a bad thing. It's that people want to see content that's interesting, unique, that pushes the bar. I think that's great. And Ludwig shouldn't be in the same sentence as Germa. Well, I don't really like. Look, what are we doing? What are we doing here? The point is that people that do really, really big streams, people know that every single stream that you do isn't going to be like that. That's fine. But people still want to see good streams. And I think that's really kind of the... I think that's a good parallel to kind of the issue with people feeling this way about Baldur's Gate. Oh, and Jeremy are good friends. We work together all the time. Yeah, for sure. Company sells half-baked crap video games. Gamers pay full price plus more. Company makes profit. Suits think that they want that they want or will accept this. They keep repeating this. It falls on customers for allowing this. Stop buying crap unfinished games. Well, the problem now is that like there are so many ways that they lock you into making a purchase for a game before you can actually make an educated purchase on a game. Like, what are we talking about here? Pre-orders, right? Pre-orders with early access. So, like, that's what ends up happening. Now, I think, by the way, this is a good video. I'm going to link it to you guys. Make sure to give it a like. I've watched Legendary Drops. I remember, like, his channel is actually kind of blowing up. Like, I feel like I watched his videos whenever he had, like, 100 subscribers or, like, 1,000 subscribers. Now he's got, like, almost 7,000. This video has 82K views. So this is awesome. Aren't Larian Studios always in early access? Apparently that's going to stop happening. You can choose not to shop at Walmart or eat McDonald's too. Same thing with games. Yeah, but the difference there is that shopping at Walmart or shopping, like going to McDonald's versus going to, I don't know, like just your typical $50 a plate restaurant, that's a big difference in price. But like with video games, that's not really the case because every video game that's released for like a box price kind of has like a ceiling and it has a... Like, every game is coming out for, like, either $50 to $70, right? There's not as much variance in price. Buy the pre-order, get the legendary mount. Yeah, exactly. Game requires more than 2 hours to start from the beginning on Fun and Steam. Just refund, don't get fucked. Yeah. Germa wasn't trying to make money off his audience whenever he made his stuff. He just did what he loved, and the rest followed. Game studios have lost sight of this big time. I think it's okay. I really don't like the idea that it's bad to want to make money. I think that it's totally okay and it's good that people want to make money because it gives them a tangible incentive to create a good product at like a fast rate. But the issue is that Yeah, it's this thing here. I don't want to watch it again because I've watched it like 10 times. But it's basically that the creative people don't have leadership roles and the people that make more money do. And that just happens more and more and more and more.